everyone. I'm Brian Love, head of Travillian's Banking and Fintech practice. We help financial institutions, including banks, credit unions, and CDFIs all over the country with their most important talent mandates, including executive search, succession planning, and advisory projects with boards and leadership teams. Please visit TravillianGroup.com to learn more about us, our history, and the many clients from coast to coast that we've assisted. We also created Travillian Next, our content channel, in 2020, right when COVID started, to be a differentiated voice in the financial services industry. And I personally love shining a light on unique stories and initiatives in the banking sector. Today's webinar is an embodiment of this particular ideal. We are joined today by Tom Ogaard, President and CEO of Native American Bank, to learn a little bit more about him and the bank. Nice to have you, Tom.
It's nice to be with you, Brian.
Terrific. Well, I was thinking back, you and I met about 2 years ago when I was at the Independent Community Bankers of Colorado conference in the fall, and we sat at the same table, and I remember you actually, I think, had a fireside chat with Comptroller Sioux, correct?
I did.
Yeah, and that was awesome. And you got on my radar at that point. So maybe you could tell me a little bit more about who you are, your time in the industry, and where you are now and what you're up to.
Well, thank you, Brian. And as I said, nice to be with you. I've been at Native American Bank now finishing my 12th year as president and CEO. Been in the business over 40 years, and I've been involved in banking Indian country since the mid-'80s when I had a group of bank locations in northern Minnesota, and one of those happened to be on a reservation. And consequently got involved in lending and doing business in a tribal community, and it was my first entree into the complexities and the nuances of trying to bank in Indian country.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And tell me a little bit more about Native American Bank. I know you're based in Denver. I think, is that where you're sitting right now, even though you're a native Minnesotan, right?
I am in Denver. I'm sitting in my office right now. We are based in Denver. Native American Bank is an interesting story. As opposed to most banks, we got our charter through an act of Congress in 1998 and actually formulated the bank in 2001. So we've been around 23 years, and I've been president and CEO for a little over half of that time. Native American Bank is a mission-oriented bank, and it got its charter simply because there was a need in Indian country for a bank that could provide access to capital where it wasn't being provided really anywhere, particularly in reservation-based communities. And so as a mission-based financial institution, our role and our mission and our entire staff is devoted to this, is to provide that access. And so we do business all over the country. We've done projects in a number of states. I think, in fact, we have loans outstanding in 30 different states at this time. And we partner with a number of other Native-owned banks, of which there are 18 in the country, and non-bank Native CDFIs, or Community Development Financial Institutions. And those are much more prevalent than Native-owned banks. And yet they're somewhat limited in their scope in terms of how much lending they can do. And as a bank, we have a lot more opportunity to help with that regard. So rather than try to come into communities and be the only provider, we really partner with others to really bring that access to capital. And we're really pleased with where we're at today, what we're doing, the projects that we've done, and the projects that we currently have in process.
That's terrific. It's a noble cause. It's very unique. And I think, we were talking just before, banking almost for everyone in this country you kind of take it for granted, right? You put your money there, you check your app. But the Native American communities have been, you know, somewhat forgotten, I think, by the bigger players. And you're trying to tap in and help them with their banking needs. Can you tell me what's different about Native American banking needs?
Well, if you look at the Native American population in the U.S., about half the population still lives on reservations in reservation-based communities. When you think about it, when tribes were moved onto reservations, they were in remote locations, some of the poorest areas of the country. There really was no access, and they had to develop their own communities at that time. And quite honestly, today, a number of those communities are still cash-based cultures. And so bringing access to banking products and services is still a new thing in a lot of these communities. And so part of our role is to help with financial literacy, take the mystique out of working with the bank. Sometimes that can be intimidating for anybody. And so consequently, we're very cognizant of trying to bring all of that to these reservation-based communities where we do business.
So I read an interview with Dawson Her Many Horses, who's the managing director and head of Native American banking at Wells Fargo. And he stated in that interview, I think it was with CNN, the following quote, and I'd love your take on this quote. He said, "We're invisible largely because there is very little research or reporting on business opportunities in these communities," meaning these reservations that you just mentioned. He goes on to say, "No one is writing about the businesses that tribes are in, how big they are, their complexity, or the amount of jobs they can create." So I think in my mind, you think tribal communities, you think casinos are the large businesses, right? But there's other businesses that need banking services. So how are you in Native American Bank, helping those people and those businesses solve this problem specifically?
Well, I know Dawson. We've served on panels together, and he's absolutely right. Our experience really mirrors what he is indicating. And so when we are helping a tribe with a particular economic project, it could be a grocery store, it could be a C-store that has fast food, it could be a healthcare facility, it could be some other type of need. Um, our role is to come in and help diversify the economies in those communities, create new jobs, and sustain existing jobs, and try to create hope. Uh, the the unemployment rate on a lot of these reservation-based communities is in the 20-something%, and it can be as high as 70%, depending on where you go. And so, when we have the opportunity to go into and talk to tribal leadership in any particular geographic location, those are the kinds of um, things that we want to bring to the table and help them understand how our bank or any other bank that, for that matter, that wants to work with the tribe can help them improve the dynamic within the community. Tribes and tribal corporations are very prevalent, and they do a lot of good work, and there are a significant number of tribal entities that need banking services. And they do business and can do business in a number of cases and all over the country. And so consequently, it is I think, kind of a hidden economic element of the entire economy. And for our purposes, um, we try to expose that and have them help us do that by um, making a big deal, I guess I would say, out of those projects that we do on reservations, and um, help them increase the awareness level of what is happening and what they can bring to the table in terms of the economic enterprises that they have and how they can be utilized on and off the reservation.
Now, I want to hear a little bit more about some of the projects that you've helped. I guess before I mention that, you are a certified CDFI by the Department of the Treasury, and I know that you also, I do believe, won New Markets Tax Credit Awards in recent years. I'm actually just kind of curious how that process was. Was it difficult to win those monies? Was it, years in the making? That's just a sidebar question. But the real question is, now that you have access to that, I'd love to hear about some of those projects too. So a little two-pronged question there, Tom.
Sure. Well, the Treasury Department has a division called CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution, and they do have a resource fund through which they provide a number of programs for support for bank CDFIs, of which we are one, or non-bank CDFIs, of which there's a significant number more of those. They also are responsible for deploying the New Markets tax credits. And we, in the most recent round, were allocated $50 million of tax credits. It is not lending, but it is providing a tax credit to a particular project that is eligible. And it is an investor who goes in and buys those tax credits and subsequently reduces their tax liability. And this is all through the U.S. Treasury Department. And so consequently, finding those projects, of which we found for the 50 million, we have found 5 projects have designated those allocations and are working on those projects to come to fruition, and we expect those to happen by the end of the year. And as an example, well, aside from that, we are also what's called a source lender into New Markets projects, where we might not have an allocation, but there's additional financing needed, and we're one of those lenders that does that as well. And I can talk about both those types of projects. Today, we're seeing a number of healthcare facility projects in Indian Country. We provided a $10 million loan to a Midwest tribe to help them build a opioid treatment facility on their reservation, which from an opioid addiction perspective, it's much more prevalent on tribal reservation than it is in the general population. And that received quite a bit of press. We partnered with one other Native-owned bank and 2 other Native CDFIs, non-bank CDFIs, to help another Midwestern tribe do a 60,000 square foot expansion to their hospital and bring services where their tribal members were leaving the community, bring all of those back so they can stay in their community for the treatments that they need. We are working on today some other healthcare facilities with regard to New Markets. We are working on not New Markets related, but we're working on housing projects. And then we're working on other economic development projects, some of those being energy, others relative to whatever the economic opportunity is for those particular tribal communities. So it really can run the gamut for us in terms of what we can do. We can be very creative in terms of the capital stack that we can help them provide. And we have a number of other partner banks and non-banks that can come into transactions that can help facilitate getting a deal done and creating economic opportunity for tribes and tribal communities.
And those partner banks could be mega banks like a Wells Fargo.
We have partnered with top
Chase.
20 banks in the country and done deals with them to, some of them don't know how to navigate, how to do the work that we do in and on trust-based land. and we've become expert at that and can navigate those things fairly well. And consequently, we're sought out on any number of transactions where we might not normally be asked to participate.
And I'm curious, how big is your team at Native American Bank?
Well, it's growing. We have a team here in Denver. There are probably 5 or 6 of us that travel the country, but and then work on transactions. And of course, we have support staff that helps significantly in that as well. But in order for us, and we're not going to be able to do everything out of Denver, nor are we going to be able to hire all the right folks out of Denver. So last September, we opened an office in the Pacific Northwest in Issaquah, Washington. We are building out our team there. We just um, put together a letter of intent on our first branch in that area. We've now hired, and we have 3 people in the Portland, Oregon area. So we are starting to build out that. I just in the month of June was I was in 4 time zones in 30 hours, including Alaska. So we were we were busy. I was busy traveling and creating relationships, and the way to do that for us is face to face. So rather than do all that traveling, I figured we better have boots on the ground closer to where we're doing business. And we're starting to build out those teams, and we have plans for other regional offices around the country as we have a significant amount of capital we're looking to deploy.
Well, that's the banker in you, pressing the flesh, as they say, right? Yeah. I'm kind of curious in these Native American communities. You mentioned a few of these great projects, expanding a hospital, a healthcare facility for opioid addiction, housing, et cetera. Are there, what do you think are the top 2 biggest issues that these communities have to deal with? Is it, food desert? Is deserts, or is it energy? Is it that financial literacy just, itself?
Well, financial literacy is universal in its need. I would say the number one need for tribal communities is housing. It absolutely is a need. There is such that the lack of infrastructure uh, creates a kind of a bottleneck in terms of trying to develop that housing. And because a lot of these communities are so rural, bringing that infrastructure at times can be a difficult proposition. Healthcare is a critical need. Food deserts, I'll tell you what, is something we worked on. We did working on a new markets deal in northern Minnesota. We provided a significant loan so they could build a 27,000 square foot facility that had a laundromat in it, had a Subway sandwich shop in it. It had a gas station facility. It created over 20 new jobs and sustained the existing jobs. And it eliminated a 76-mile round trip uh, trip to find fresh food. So those are that's just one example of the kinds of need that's there, and we've been able to step in and help those communities.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, obviously, I'll just call out my own ignorance. I live in Pennsylvania, and obviously, there's these Native American reservations and communities really all over the country. I didn't even realize I was in Minnesota, your home turf, and there's a large population of Native Americans in Minnesota. Actually, I think in 2022 there was actually a first ever Indigenous Miss Minnesota who
Mm-hmm.
won, and she was at the one conference, the BHCA conference that I was at. That was pretty exciting. Um, yeah, I mean, these folks are really all over the country.
Yeah, there's 574 federally recognized tribes. let alone the indigenous population in Alaska and Hawaii. And if you look at a map of where they're all located, the vast majority are in the Western U.S., which is a concentration for us. And yet we've done projects in the southeast and the northeast as well. And those 574 federally recognized tribes are in 33 of the 50 states.
Wow.
So it really is all over the country. It is for us. It's really gratifying to bring a project to fruition, watch it happen, and then see how it impacts the community in a very meaningful way.
Well, I guess my last question is, I don't know. There's so many voices now, that you turn to for almost any subject, especially political or economic. Do you feel a lot of optimism for the Native American population, moving forward?
I do, and I think that the tribes themselves have a number of programs that they are implementing to to bring the youth within their communities the hope that they can have a better life for themselves than perhaps they had. And it is through a number of different things. I've met a lot of highly educated, well intentioned uh, folks from a number of different tribal communities who go back to their communities and can bring the knowledge that they have gained and the resources that they know are available and try and help their community lift itself up. And so banks like ours, and there are becoming more of them, are, I think, uh, one element. And I think, uh, without trying to say that we're the only thing that really works, but I think it's important to note that without the help that we provide, and there are other banks who do this, some of these projects will never get done. And so when you can go into these communities and get these projects completed and see them come to fruition and they're successful, you not only build the relationship that you're looking to build, but you're creating hope and an opportunity for those that are there. And I think that's kind of an inverted pyramid. It's growing. The base is small, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it will be um, it will be better. And I think the sophistication among the tribes is at its highest level ever. And they're doing tribal leaders are doing a lot of great things around the country, and we're glad to be a part of it.
Well, that's terrific. And I do sense optimism, and, everything that you and your team are doing at Native American Bank is inspiring. Um, I do appreciate you spending a little time with me today, Tom. Just wondering, I guess, any final thoughts you have about, if there's people listening that want to get involved or lend a hand or learn more. Is there anything that you can tell us?
Well, we would certainly welcome any outreach that if someone were looking to have a conversation with us, they can go on our website at nativeamericanbank.com, reach out to us. We're happy to have a conversation and bring the knowledge base that we have and help people understand where the need is, how they can help, and how we can partner together. We're all about building relationships wherever that may be. And so we welcome that opportunity.
Well, terrific. And just as a little fun thing that I do, I'm just kind of curious. I'm a movie guy. What is your favorite movie, Tom, of all time?
Oh gosh, my favorite movie of all time. There's so many of them. I used to sit around with my parents and watch all the old ones. Um, North by Northwest for me was always a fun old movie. Alfred Hitchcock, that to me, you look at it today and go, that's not so scary, but back in the day it was. And so
Yep.
that to me is one of those that I really enjoy watching.
That's a terrific film with Cary Grant, and
Exactly.
was the famous scene at Mount Rushmore, right?
It was at Mount Rushmore, correct?
And if you
Yeah.
watch that scene in Mount Rushmore, I think there's a shooting. There's a little girl in the corner of the screen, and she puts her hands over her ears because she knows the shot is coming. And Hitchcock did not edit that out. They didn't catch it until later. But that's just a little bit of trivia. I'm a huge Hitchcock fan too. So,
Yeah.
well, anyway, Tom, thanks for having a little fun there at the end, and thank you so much again for everything you're doing. Really, really happy you joined us today.
Thank you for having me, Brian.